Welcome to Transformative Principal, where you learn how to be a leader and not just a manager of a to-do list. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Your to-do list is a hungry monster that is never satisfied. For the last year and a half, I've helped principals get awards, get promoted, and find the time to do the work that really matters. I recently opened a new mastermind slot. Schedule a call with me and let's overcome the stressed and isolated principal position together. Go to the show notes for this episode at transformativeprincipal.org and click Schedule a Call with Jethro. I've had great reviews from principals who have purchased the trauma course that I have available at jethrojones.com/trauma. And it's not too late in the year to start talking about this. One principal recently got it and wanted to talk especially about self-care at this time of year. And that's a big part of dealing with trauma in your schools. So go to jethrojones.com/trauma and get that course today. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I'm continuing this week my conversation with Dr. Michael Reichert, the author of the book, How to Raise a Boy, The Power of Connection to Build Good Men. Loved reading this book. Loved talking to Michael. I hope you enjoy this. When we left off last week, Michael had just said that a boy is not going to learn from someone he doesn't have a relationship with. And that is so much the truth. And we're going to talk more about that, as well as it being the responsibility of the adult in the relationship to manage that relationship. So thank you so much for listening to Transformative Principal, and enjoy the rest of my conversation with Dr. Michael Reichert. And I got to share this story with a kid that we'll call Richard. Okay. So Richard was, he was a normal squirrely boy diagnosed with ADHD, kind of defiant, like most boys that we run into. And we could see this little hint every once in a while where he would totally engage in learning. And it was awesome, but it was so rare and we couldn't pinpoint right where it was. And then one day, and I, as the principal, I got this kid in trouble all the time because he was always doing something that was just needling someone or getting under somebody's skin. And finally, I had built this relationship with him over the course of the year. And finally, towards the end of the year, he said, I don't like that teacher, that guy teacher there, because he doesn't like me and he treated me poorly and I've never forgiven him and I won't forgive him. And so he did something to that male teacher. And I said, why did you do that? And he said, because I think he's a jerk. He doesn't care about me. And I was like, from the mouth of babes. And so we talked about it and he finally admitted it. And as I was reading your book, I was like, this is Richard for sure. This is exactly what his issue was. And so I found him an adult male teacher in the building who could build a relationship with him and be positive with him besides me, because I was the principal and the disciplinarian. And I continued building that relationship with him. And once he had someone for whom he was willing to work, he totally changed. And when that guy talked to him, he did his work right away, did it well, tried really hard. When anybody else who he didn't have a relationship with talked to him, he was arrogant and disrespectful and wouldn't do anything. And it was like, you guys, we're seeing two different boys here. We're seeing the boy who has a relationship, who's amazing, and we love him, and the boy who doesn't have a relationship, and everybody cannot stand him. And so that, as I was reading your book, I was just like, that is exactly the case. And if we would have started with that relationship, I bet he never would have gone down that other path. But because we failed to do that, it was an uphill climb the whole way back. But when he was on 100%. And it was inspiring to see how much he would engage when there was a relationship.
Yeah, and inspiring and so reassuring, isn't it? That no matter what the mask is that boys are wearing, and they can really look frightening. We found in our study, the second study, where we really dug into the quality of the relationships that worked and the features of the relationships that did not work and the reasons for the relational breakdowns. What we found was that the positive relationships truly were transformative. That the boy that you described was in these stories that were so inspiring, so exciting, so validating of the power of a connection with a teacher to lift boys up to altogether new heights. I speak of these relationships as transformative on 3 levels. They're practically transformative in the sense that boys can, run faster, they can win track meets, they can take tests, they can pass exams, they can go on to the next grade. So in a very practical way, they acquire new skills and knowledge and they can progress. But they're psychologically transformative in the sense that their self-concept changes, the way they see themselves and the way that they envision their futures and their possibilities is changed. And then I think most importantly, maybe for me as a psychologist, I don't know if it's as true for you, but it's existentially transformative. I come to recognize that I'm not alone. And whatever disappointments or letdowns I've experienced in the world, and many boys come to school having had ruptured attachments, broken relationships, lots of disappointment. They're not easy to form relationships with. Sometimes they're very withdrawn, very rejecting, very antagonistic, willing to be disruptive and oppositional. Whatever experiences they've carried into your class or your school, what our research told us was that every single kind of problem that was described on the breakdown, the negative relationship side of our investigation, we were hearing transformed on the positive side. And it led us to conclude that every boy can be reached by someone who's approaching them with the right strategy and who's confident that they can be reached. It might not be, within your wheelhouse at present. You've got a relational repertoire and it's tried and true, and you do everything you can. If you still strike out with a boy, what we heard in our stories was teachers saying, I did everything that could reasonably be expected of me. I can't reach him. He's beyond reach. And yet we were hearing that boy was being reached by the gym coach or the librarian or, someone, somewhere. And it tells us that they can be reached with the right strategy. So your story about seeing 2 different people is really just 2 sides of the same boy.
Yep.
And knowing that boy is in there and can be reached should motivate all of us to expand our wheelhouse, our relational repertoire, and to take in the study, what we concluded was it's the adult teacher coach, it's the adult's job to be the relationship manager. And if a relationship has become weakened or broken, unfortunately, it falls to the adult, the professional, to be the one to fix that relationship. I say unfortunately because I think the emotional labor that we're asking of teachers is a big job. It comes on top of all the other expectations we're putting on teachers.
Yeah.
But I think, as I said, I think it's the reason so many people went into education. I think changing lives, lifting kids up is the reward. It's not the salary, right?
That's right. And that is exactly it. And we see the power in that. And at the same time, we put so much in, it's easy to become, as adults, it's easy to feel like you want to give up because you do put a lot in and it is difficult and it is challenging. But that part about the 3 ways that it's transformative and then the adult being the relationship manager, I think is so powerful because once you recognize that that's what your job is, and that relationship manager really put into words the way that I've dealt with that when I've had a problem with a kid, I go to the kid and I say, man, it feels like we're just not clicking. We need to get back on the right page. And here's where I feel like I made a mistake, where I felt like I lost trust with you. And I want to say this is like how that happened and what I went through and why I acted the way that I did. And I had that experience with this kid who was really a tough case, and he left our school. And I knew that it worked because I had that kind of a conversation with him just before he left. And then he came back. And when he came back, I went out to shake his hand and welcome him back. And he hit my hand out of the way. And this kid was like always defiant. And so I thought he was like, oh, this guy's trying to be my friend, not going to happen. And I thought he was mad. He hit my hand out of the way and then gave me a big hug. And I was like, okay,
wow,
welcome back. And it was like,
yeah,
that's when you know that it's working. And that's how it's powerful, because that kid, he had, an alcoholic mom and mom had tons of different boyfriends, and he didn't have good male role models in his life, and he didn't know what a boy was supposed to do. So he was taking on this protector role of always protecting his mom and always fighting with everybody at school. And it was just like, okay, that I made it. And that kid wasn't perfect after that, but we sure were able to talk man to man, I would say, after that, where I could say I messed up and he could say, well, I messed up too, and this is what I did wrong. And it just totally changed the dynamic, so that it wasn't just like me saying you have to comply and do what you're supposed to. We had conversations that were like, what kind of a person do you want to be when you grow up? Not what do you want to do at work, but how do you want to live your life? Do you want to be a good husband and a good dad? Yeah, I totally do, because I don't have that. And it's like, well, then these are the things that need to happen for you to do that. And just, it was amazing.
Jethro, you achieved your goal. You achieved influence on him. And you did that. You were able to leverage that in powerful ways, simply because he recognized that you were going to reach for him person to person, that you respected him enough to reveal yourself as a human being to him. And you were able to expect him, as a consequence of the bond that you built with him, to be a good man and to live up to his own, goals, rather than self-defeating and self-destructive behavior. Let's talk for a minute about relational breakdowns, if we can.
Yeah, that's
because I think school leaders are always being confronted with that problem, and I think they often don't know what to do about it. They often feel blaming either of the boy who's acting out or the teacher who's sending the boy to the office, or
exactly.
And I think a lot of school leaders don't know how to promote the relationship between the teacher and the boy, particularly when teachers come feeling frustrated at the end of their rope, demanding, disciplinary action. Really, I think often wanting that boy or that problem out of their class.
Yeah, they want a pound of flesh sometimes, because they put so much in and they're so frustrated that it's not working. They're like, I need my heart back that I gave to that kid.
Yeah, and I think that what we found in our research, so relational breakdowns, big and small, happen all the time. Every single kind of relationship goes through a cycle of connection, disconnection, reconnection. My relationship with my wife, my relationship with my sons, my grandson, that's the normal cycle in relationships. And typically what we do is, when we notice we've gotten a little bit separated, we undertake a strategy to reconnect. What we're saying in these pedagogical relationships is, it's the responsibility of the relationship manager to monitor whether the relationship is vibrant, alive, strong, or not. And if it's not strong, or if it's become disconnected, to undertake some strategy to reconnect. So first role for teachers is to notice what's happening. And sometimes these breakdowns are visible. It's the boy that's disrupting the class, or the boy that's not doing any work, or the boy that is distracting everybody around him, whatever. That's a relationship where the boy is not feeling any particular accountability to the teacher, any responsibility to respectfully engage in what he's asking them to do. And it's a sign. But there's another kind of breakdown, which I think is more problematic, even. It may not be as vexing, but it showed up in our data a lot. And that was the boy that simply checks out, or never engages, underperforms. And that's another way that boys indicate that they're not feeling it. You've got no traction with them. You haven't gotten to first base. So I think that the relationship breakdown is a sign. It's a cry, really, for some outreach from the teacher to the boy. And there's lots and lots of different strategies that we describe in the book that I wrote with my partner, I Can Learn From You, Boys as Relational Learners. And those strategies really came from teachers in the trenches. They're not our strategies. We deduced them from the lessons that we heard, or the stories we heard. The relational gestures that we describe in the book, teachers tend to have some or other of those strategies. And what we're saying is that if you have a repertoire of favored gestures, you may not be able to reach that boy that you're striking out with within the framework of that repertoire. You may have to reset your attitude and try something else. What happens to teachers, though, when they get to the end of their ropes is I think they tend to feel defensive. Sometimes they project that negative feeling onto the boy himself. They develop an attitude, a hardened attitude, and a mindset about that boy. They get stuck, and they tend to defend their position by attributing the problem to the boy or to his circumstances in some way. Family problems that are untenable, or psychological difficulties that are interfering, socioeconomic pressures, whatever it might be. And like I said previously, every type of boy with all of those difficulties was being reached in the stories we heard. So I guess the message is breakdowns are common, they're natural. It's the teacher's job to undertake strategies to repair a weakened or broken relationship. When a teacher reaches the end of their accustomed strategies, though, that's, I think, really when that teacher needs the support of a school leader. The problem is that many school leaders themselves don't know how to support that emotional labor in a way that doesn't seem to the teacher who's striking out as if they're being somehow threatened by the leader. There's some evaluation that's being made of them as insufficient or inadequate. They already feel bad. They already feel defensive. And here comes the school leader urging them to, try harder, do more, come up with something that they don't have an answer for, bang their head against that brick wall one more time. What that teacher's thinking is, yeah, it's easy for you to say from your office, but you're not in the trenches with me. You don't have to go back to that class and manage all of those impossible needs.
Yep.
So I think that, in terms of what you might say as a school leader to teachers at the end of their ropes like that, I think what you might say is you recognize that this is really challenging, that it can be very frustrating. And yet I think you want to say something like this: you have the power to change this boy's life. I know it's really hard, and that he has grown really accustomed to expecting very little, and even to being, even to self-sabotaging. But if you can bear with him and continue to reach for him, maybe checking in with other teachers that are trying also, so that you're not as alone. Maybe someone's got an idea. Maybe there's something you haven't tried that you can think of if you talk to other people. But yeah, I'd like you to keep trying, and I will back and support you. You can always come into me and complain about this boy. Please remember that I'm going to hold out for the power you have to change his life.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I've been guilty of that myself, and not intentionally, but I know that I've put those expectations on those teachers. And, part of the challenge is that the teacher can push them off to me, but as a principal, I don't have anybody to push them off to. And so I have to have that conversation. I have to build that relationship. And, by the time they get to me, a lot of times they've been quote unquote burned by a number of teachers. And so their trust level for adults is really quite low. And so, I know that I've been guilty of that. I know that it's a complicated issue, and it's something that I certainly want to get better at. So in closing, Michael, what is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you?
Well, I think that simply to understand that he or she is asking their teachers to do this emotional work, validating the reality of how hard it can feel, and offering to support it, while saying very, very clearly to their faculty, boys are relational learners first. If you don't have a connection with your students, they're going to not engage with you and go to that place, that vulnerable place where they're willing to learn from you. The title of my book, I Can Learn From You, actually is a play on an earlier book by Herbert Cole titled I Won't Learn From You. And that's the go-to defensive strategy of a boy who is not connected, who feels disrespected or not cared for.
Yeah.
So that's what I would recommend to principals that they can do today, this week, is to really take to heart the message, the learning, the thing that they know but may have forgotten, that boys in particular are willing to check out, often arbitrarily and unfairly, but have to be reached in order to learn.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Michael. And again, the book is called How to Raise a Boy, The Power of Connection to Build Good Men. And you can learn more from Michael at michaelcreichert.com. And any other ways that you would like people to connect with you, Michael?
No, that'll do it. I'd be happy to hear from folks. Thank you, Jethro, and thank you to your listeners for investing time and thinking about this dimension of boys learning.
Yep. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Yeah, happy to.